My daughter turned off her phone for 3 weeks, so I went to her house. When I arrived, I heard desperate banging coming from the shed. I broke the padlock and found my daughter inside. She was dirty and exhausted. I asked her who had done this. She barely managed to say, "It was him," before fainting. That is why I made him pay the price. But before we continue, please check if you have subscribed to the Elderly Stories channel. Share in the comments where you are watching us from. We would love to know how far our revenge stories reach. I gripped the steering wheel tight and sped up. My old car threw itself down the familiar road leading to Sarah's house. Exactly 3 weeks had passed since I last heard her voice. On the passenger seat, my phone lay motionless. The screen was completely black, hiding a long list of missed calls and messages that never received a reply. A restlessness like a vine full of thorns had squeezed my heart for all those days, and today I could not take it anymore. I stopped in front of the gate. A bad feeling slid inside me when I saw the iron gate was not closed. I pushed it gently. The mailbox was full bulging with letters and bills that no one had collected. The front yard was so silent, it gave me chills. My granddaughter Lily's red tricycle was overturned on the yellowing grass. The front door was locked. I rang the doorbell, but there was no answer. I rang again, leaving my finger on the button for longer. Nothing. My chest tightened. I went around the house to the backyard. Sarah, Daniel, Lily, Grandma is here. My voice cracked in that absolute silence. The backyard was empty too. A mix of confusion and disappointment fell over me. Surely they had gone out. Maybe a last-minute trip. I tried to calm myself down. I thought about going to Linda's house, the neighbor, to ask if she knew anything. Just when I turned around, a very faint sound, almost imperceptible, reached my ears. I stood still, holding my breath to listen better. My heart began to beat hard. It was a weak, desperate scratching. The sound repeated, coming from the old rusted metal shed at the bottom of the garden, a place the family only used to store some tools and old junk. I walked fast toward the shed. The metal door was closed with a huge black industrial padlock. I put my ear against the freezing metal. From inside, I heard weak moans, broken and almost unrecognizable. Then again, that sound of fingernails scratching desperately on the inside of the door. There was no time to think. The instinct of a mother and a karate teacher that had been in my blood for years woke up suddenly. I took a few steps back, adopting a firm stance. I did not aim at the padlock. It was too resistant. My target was the weakest hinge, that thin part of metal joining the padlock to the door. I launched a decisive blow with my elbow. The shock of the metal resonated with a sharp pain that went up my arm, but I did not care. On the first hit, the hinge bent. On the second, I concentrated all my strength and all my rage until I heard a dry crack that broke the air. The padlock fell to the ground, bouncing against the cement with a metallic sound. I pulled the door hard. It swung open. A gust of terrible air hit me head-on, making me gag. It was a mix of strong urine-damp earth rust and a sour smell like rotting meat. My eyes took a few seconds to get used to the thick darkness inside. And then I saw her. Sarah was curled up on the damp floor. Her blonde hair, once shiny, was now matted dirty, full of dirt and cobwebs. Her silk pajamas, so delicate, were torn and stained with things I could not identify. Her face was sunken, her cheekbones sticking out, her lips split and cracked, bleeding. She looked up. Her empty eyes took a moment to recognize me. Her lips trembled, trying to form a sound that did not come out. I screamed without a voice. I threw myself forward, fell to my knees beside her, and hugged her body, which was thin as a skeleton. Her skin was freezing. Who did this to you?" I screamed with tears falling uncontrollably. Sarah rested her head on my shoulder, her weak breath brushing my neck. She whispered every word, tearing away the last of her strength. "It was him. My husband. He locked me in." Upon finishing, her body went completely limp, and she fainted in my arms. With all my strength, I lifted her. She was as light as a child. I carried her to the car and placed her carefully in the back seat. At the hospital, I did not even manage to park well before jumping out of the car and running to ask for help. The nurses and doctors ran out with a stretcher and took Sarah in a hurry to the emergency room. A young nurse stopped me at the door. Her voice tried to calm me down, but I heard nothing. I could only watch helplessly as the emergency room doors slammed shut. I let myself fall onto the freezing metal bench in the hallway. My whole body shook without control. A young couple walked by. The man gently had his arm around his wife's shoulders, and she rested her head on him with a satisfied smile. That simple image was like a key that suddenly opened a drawer of memories I had kept locked away for a long time. The first day Sarah brought Daniel to introduce him returned with the clarity of a movie. That dinner at my house was very warm. Daniel wore a light blue shirt, expensive, and brought a bottle of fine wine that he said came from Napa Valley. He shook my hand firmly, a sure grip typical of a successful man. He looked me straight in the eyes without the slightest shyness and called me ma'am, with a voice so polite and charming it could melt any mother. During the whole dinner, he did not stop serving food to Sarah. He told funny stories about his work in real estate, about successful deals and trips abroad. My daughter sitting next to him had eyes shining with a happiness impossible to hide. Watching them, I thought in silence that my daughter was very lucky. She had found a good man, a solid support. How wrong I was. The sound of stretcher wheels moving fast down the hall, rumbling on the ceramic floor, brought me back suddenly to the harsh reality. I checked my phone again like a desperate reflex. The screen remained black. Silence. That silence reminded me of those moments when the sound cut off suddenly. It was a phone call from about 6 months ago. Sarah's name appeared on the screen, and I answered with joy. But the girl voice on the other end was tense, hurried. "Mom, I am just calling to see how you are. Have you been feeling well lately?" I had not yet managed to answer when I heard Daniel speaking loudly near her, his voice hard. "Who are you talking to?" "To your mother again." I heard Sarah quiet answer. "It is nothing, love. Just Mom." She came back quickly to me. "I have to hang up. I am busy with something," and she cut off immediately, leaving me only the long beep sound and a vague uneasiness. A nurse walked by with a roll of white bandages in her hand. That white made me suddenly remember the time I saw a bruise on my girl arm. It was a Sunday morning. I arrived at her house without warning, bringing some cupcakes she liked. Sarah was making coffee in the kitchen. She was wearing a turtleneck sweater with long sleeves, even though it was hot. When she reached out to take a cup from the high shelf, the sleeve slid down unintentionally, leaving exposed a dark bruise, clearly marked with the shape of fingers on her white wrist. A handprint. Unmistakable. I stood staring at that bruise, feeling my heart stop for a second. She seemed to notice my gaze and pulled down her sleeve right away, giving me a forced smile. That smile, now that I think about it, was so twisted and tense. "Yesterday I hit myself on the edge of the table, Mom. You see, I am always so clumsy." I remember doubting a cold feeling running down my back. But her smile was so perfect, her explanation so reasonable that I ended up scolding myself for thinking too much, for mistrusting without reason. I could no longer stay seated. I got up and started walking back and forth through the endless hallway. Every step was a beat of torment. I remembered meeting Linda at the local market a few months ago. She had pulled me close to her vegetable stand. She looked around and lowered her voice to whisper, "Emily, I do not know if I should tell you this. I do not want to meddle where I do not belong, but for several nights now I hear screams from your daughter house. It is Daniel's voice. He arrives late, smelling of alcohol." She looked at me with eyes full of worry and compassion. "I only worry about poor Sarah. She looks so pale lately." Linda warning was like an alarm bell. I could no longer ignore it. The next day, I had a direct conversation with my daughter. Sarah and I sat on the swing in her backyard, the one where as a child she asked me to push her higher. I took her hand, looked deep into her eyes, and asked her bluntly, "Sarah, tell me the truth. Has Daniel done something to you?" Tears welled up immediately, rolling down her gaunt cheeks, but she shook her head hard, denying it again and again. "No, Mom. He is just stressed about work. The company is going through a bad time. He loves us very much, Lily and me." I advised her with a pleading voice, "If you are not happy, come back home. Daughter, our door is always open. I will always be here." Sarah dried her tears in a hurry, and her voice became strangely firm. "I cannot, Mom. I do not want Lily to grow up in a broken family. I can endure. Do not worry. I can endure. That phrase now rumbles in my head like a curse, like invisible blades cutting my heart. I believed her. I respected her decision. I left her alone to face that demon disguised as a husband. The awful truth was hiding behind the hidden bruises, the clumsy lies, the rushed calls, and finally the shed door locked with a key. All those loose pieces now fitted together to form a complete picture, a picture of hell. And I understood that I too had been part of the silence that allowed this tragedy. The whirlwind of memories and regrets in my mind was interrupted by the hurried sound of footsteps in the hall. The emergency doors burst open. An older doctor with a face lined by wrinkles of exhaustion and the grave expression of someone who has seen too much suffering came out and pronounced my name. Ms. Emily. I jumped to my feet, my heart dropping to my stomach. He invited me into a small office with air saturated with disinfectant. He did not beat around the bush. He explained Sarah's condition with cold medical terms that I tried to understand through the fog of fear. Grade 3, malnutrition, severe electrolyte dehydration, high fever, caused by infections and skin sores from remaining motionless for too long. Every word was like a hammer blow to my chest. He stopped, took off his glasses, and looked me straight in the eyes with a raw expression filled with pity. Emily, in simple words, your daughter body is practically eating itself to survive. In her stomach we found almost nothing, only remains of expired canned food and rainwater. We had to pump her stomach to eliminate all those toxic substances. I stood paralyzed. Rainwater. My daughter had to drink rainwater to survive. My throat was dry, incapable of pronouncing a word. They allowed me to enter the intensive care unit. Pushing the heavy door, I felt I was entering another world. Sarah lay there small and fragile to the extreme between the white sheets. Her thin, pale arm was covered in intravenous tubes. A transparent oxygen mask covered her emaciated face. The heart monitor next to her bed made a constant beep-beep, a mechanical sound without a soul, but in that moment it was the sweetest melody I had ever heard. It was the only proof my daughter was still alive, that she was still fighting. I approached slowly, dragged a chair to the side of the bed, and trembling took her hand. Her skin was freezing, without a hint of warmth. I leaned in, brought my lips to her ear, and whispered through held-back tears. "It is me, Mom. Sarah, Mom is here, baby. Everything is going to be okay. I promise you. I promise I am going to make him pay for every tear he made you shed." Just at that moment, a shrill and out-of-place sound broke the sacred silence of the room. Sarah phoned the one the nurse had found in her coat pocket, and given to me began to ring with a cheerful pop melody that felt cruelly ironic. I jumped and took the phone out of my purse. On the lit screen, the words, "Beloved husband," flashed endlessly next to a red heart. My blood boiled. That wretch! He dared to call. I felt the fury rise like a wave, but I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. It was not the moment to scream. I slid my finger across the screen to answer. I did not even manage to say a word when Daniel's voice roared on the other end, loaded with rage and resentment. He did not ask how anyone was. He did not say hello. He screamed straight into the phone like a wounded animal. "You think you are so smart. Who gave you permission to get out of there? Do you think you can escape from me? I give you 5 minutes. Bring that damn body back, or I swear something is going to happen to Lily." I kept silent. I let him vomit all his poison, all those dirty and cruel swear words. He was breathing heavily, full of fury. He was at the house. He had already discovered Sarah was not in the shed. When he paused to take a breath, I spoke with a firm voice, slow and clear, like a block of ice. "It is me, Emily." On the other end of the line, a deadly silence fell. I could hear his breathing stop suddenly, as if someone had squeezed his neck. A few seconds later, a dry beep sounded. He had hung up. Coward. The call ended and the phone screen locked itself, and what appeared there squeezed my chest, as if someone was tearing my heart apart. It was a family photo taken on the beach. Daniel had his arm around Sarah, both smiling happily under the sun. Little Lily was sitting on her dad's shoulders, with her hair flying in the wind, waving at the camera. A happy family, fake to perfection. A framed lie. If you do not want something to happen to Lily. His threat rumbled in my head. He had not found Sarah. He was at that house. And Lily? Where was my adored granddaughter? Was she with him? Absolute panic invaded me, colder and sharper than any fear I had felt before. No, it could not be. I ran out of the room. I grabbed the arm of a nurse passing nearby. "Please," I stammered. "Watch my daughter for a moment. I have to go now. Please." I did not wait for her answer. I could not lose one more second. I ran toward the parking lot, my chest burning. The keys shook in my hand, and it took me several attempts to get them in the lock. I had to go back to that house. I had to find Lily. When I braked suddenly in front of the gate, the tires screeched with a sharp sound. The scene remained the same. The gate half open, the tricycle overturned on the grass. But now, to my eyes, everything had a sinister air. The house was quiet, like a beast sleeping after devouring its prey. The broken padlock on the ground next to the shed was no longer an inert object. It was a scar, a silent proof of the crime that had just occurred. As soon as I got out of the car without having stabilized myself well, a familiar and warm voice crossed the fog of fear wrapping me. "Emily, there you are." I looked up. Linda, my kind neighbor, was on the porch of her house with a watering can in her hand, and holding her hand tightly was Lily, my granddaughter. In that instant, time stopped. Lily saw me, opened her eyes wide, and without thinking a second, let go of Linda, hand ran across the street, and clung to my legs, breaking into a heartbreaking cry. It was a cry held back for too long, full of anguish and fear. I let myself fall to my knees with no strength in my legs. I hugged her with all my might, burying my face in her soft hair that smelled of sunshine. "My Lily, I am here," I whispered with a broken voice. I checked her desperately from head to toe. Her clothes were clean, her hair braided with care, not a single scratch. She was safe. A huge stone that oppressed my chest during that whole desperate trip vanished. I let out a long sigh, feeling I was coming back to life. Linda approached, her face full of worry and confusion. "My God, I have been calling you these past days and could not get through. I thought you had gone far away." She looked at the girl crying in my arms, and then at the house across the street, sighing. "Daniel told me he had problems with his wife, that Sarah had gone to her mother's house for a while to calm down. He asked me to take care of Lily." I felt a buzzing in my ears. A farce. She continued with a pained voice. "He brought the girl almost a month ago. She looked sad, devastated. She kept apologizing for inconveniencing me. He told me Sarah was going through a nervous breakdown and needed absolute privacy, that I should not bother her with calls. It seemed strange to me," she frowned, "that Sarah did not call even once to ask about her daughter. But seeing Daniel's shattered face, I thought, yes, they must be going through a couple crisis." My blood boiled a cold rage, sharper than the fear that invaded me before. That wretch, that monster, not only physically tortured my daughter to the brink of death, but he staged a whole play to manipulate everyone. He turned Sarah, a mother who adored her daughter, into an indifferent, selfish woman, capable of abandoning her before the eyes of the neighbors, and most painful before the eyes of her own daughter. He tried to murder my daughter by all possible means. I swallowed the lump in my throat, looked up at Linda, and said with a trembling voice, "Thank you, Linda. Truly, thank you. I owe you an apology," and I started looking for my wallet and my purse. "Lily expenses during this time. Please let me reimburse you." Linda refused. With her hand took mine to stop me with a sincere look. "Oh, do not say that. That is what neighbors are for, to support each other in anything. I love Lily as if she were my own granddaughter. Taking care of her has been good for me. There is nothing to pay here." She sighed with a sad look directed toward the house across the street. "The truth is, for a while I felt something was not right. Those screams, but now that you are here, everything is going to be okay." I stood up, one hand holding Lily, who was still sobbing, and the other gripping hard the warm, thin hand of Linda. "Thank you, you saved my granddaughter. This thanks is not only because she took care of the girl, because her presence unintentionally broke the plan of that demon. If it were not for her, maybe he would have locked Lily up too." That idea made me shudder. I took Lily to my truck, trying not to look at that house again. The girl kept sobbing against my chest. I knew the nightmare was not over yet. It had barely begun, but at least now I had recovered my granddaughter. I had recovered an essential part of my family. I drove to take Lily to the hospital, trying to keep the steering wheel steady, although inside me everything was still chaos. The girl rode in silence in the passenger seat, hugging tight a worn rag doll that I imagined Linda had given her. The girl was no longer crying, but every now and then her small shoulders shuddered with the sobs she tried to contain. Her silence was more terrifying than the crying. It was like a still lake hiding a storm underneath. We passed a small toy store on the side of the road. A thought crossed my mind. I stopped the car. I went in and bought Lily a big box of colored pencils and a pad of white paper. Sarah used to tell me that when a child cannot express their fear with words, they draw it. I hoped drawing could help her release a little of what she carried inside. When we returned to the hospital, it was getting dark. The atmosphere in the recovery room remained as silent and tense as always. Sarah still had not woken up, but the nurse said her vital signs were a little more stable. That was the only light in a day full of darkness. I sat Lily in a leather armchair in the corner of the room and spread the papers and colors on the small table in front of her. I tried to smile, although I knew my smile must look twisted. Lily, my love, draw a very pretty picture for Mom. When she wakes up and sees her daughter drawing, she is going to be very happy and she will recover faster. Lily looked at me with those big empty eyes and then nodded without saying anything, starting to color in silence. I sat next to Sarah's bed and with a wet wipe cleaned her forehead gently. I spoke to her in a low voice, only so she could hear me. I told her I had already found Lily, that she was safe, and that she was right there in that room. She is drawing for you, Sarah. She is a very good girl. Although she remained motionless, I believed that deep in her consciousness, she could hear me, she could feel her daughter's presence. A moment later, I heard a soft noise. Lily had finished. The girl came toward me with her drawing in her hand, walking on tiptoe on the cold floor. She whispered, with a voice soft as the hum of a mosquito. "Grandma," I finished. I smiled as I took the paper, but the smile froze immediately. The drawing was made with clumsy strokes of a small child, but the colors were strangely dark. In the middle of the sheet was a dark brown rectangular figure made with horizontal lines like wooden planks fitted together. Inside that box, there was a stick figure with long blonde hair raising arms, as if asking for help. And the most chilling thing was a huge black padlock drawn with many details on the outside of that box door. My heart skipped a beat. The girl had seen it. She had seen everything. But what really left me frozen, what made the blood in my veins stop, was the sentence written in the bottom corner of the drawing with crooked letters, each one a different color, as if it were part of an innocent child game. The 5th time Dad locked Mom up. The 5th time. The air in the room became thick. I knelt down to Lily eye level, trying to keep my voice as calm as I could, even though my chest was screaming. "Lily, my love, this drawing. What does it mean? Can you tell Grandma?" Lily looked at me with those big, innocent eyes that now carried a maturity that hurt. Every time Dad gets drunk, he asks Mom for money. Mom says she does not have any. Dad gets mad and says she sent it all to Grandma. The girl pointed with her little finger to the stick figure in the drawing. Then Dad pulled Mom to the shed, told her she had to stay there to reflect. He locked the door with a key. The first time I got very scared and cried loud, but the next times the girl continued with a monotonous voice that was scary, as if telling someone else's story. I did not cry anymore. I went to my room, took out paper, and started to draw. I was counting. 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. This drawing is the 5th time, Grandma. Then she took out of her little school backpack, the one Linda had prepared for her, 4 other crumpled and older sheets. Each one was a version of the same horror, a woman locked in a box, only the text changed. 1st time, 2nd time, 3rd time, 4th time. I hugged my poor granddaughter, squeezed her tight against my chest. My throat closed up. I could not cry out loud. That monster not only physically destroyed my daughter, he also left an indelible psychological scar on a child's soul. He turned my granddaughter's childhood into a calendar of the times her mother was tortured. Carefully, I took the drawings from her hands, smoothed them out, and put them delicately in my purse. They were no longer childish drawings. They were the diary of a witness, irrefutable proof. I looked at Sarah's exhausted and sleeping face on the hospital bed, then at my granddaughter, trembling in my arms. The silence was over. The resignation was finished. Tomorrow, the first thing I will do is go to the police station. Now, not only for Sarah, but also for Lily. The next morning, I left Lily with a young, kind-hearted nurse. I lied, telling her I had to go out to buy some personal things for Sarah. I did not want the girl to have to go to a cold place like the police station. I tightened the strap of my purse, feeling the edges of the papers inside. They were my weapon. The city police station was as old and cold as I imagined. The smell of old papers and stale coffee floated in the air. I briefly told what happened to the officer on duty, a middle-aged man who seemed sick of his job. He yawned and reluctantly indicated for me to go to an office at the end of the hall where he asked me to wait. The little room was narrow and dark. After a while, 2 police officers entered, one older, big-bellied with a red face from alcohol or high blood pressure. His badge said, Miller. The other was younger, tall, thin, with a more alert look. His name was Davis. I started telling them the whole story. My voice trembled from contained emotion, but I made the effort to speak clearly. Since I could not communicate with Sarah until when I had to break the shed door, my daughter, awful condition in the hospital, and finally what Lily had told me and drawn. I solemnly placed the 5 drawings on the cold metal table. This, I said with a hoarse voice, this is the proof. My granddaughter saw everything. The young policeman Davis picked up the drawings and looked at them carefully. Frowning, I saw a ray of hope, but the older officer Miller barely glanced at them and then made an impatient gesture with his hand. Ma'am, these are just drawings by a child. We cannot accuse anyone with this. Children have a lot of imagination. My heart shrank. They called Daniel. An hour later he appeared. The monster came dressed in an elegant suit tie, perfectly placed, hair perfectly combed. He did not look like a criminal, but a successful businessman leaving an important meeting. He greeted the policeman kindly, even shook Officer Miller's hand. Upon seeing me, he faked an expression of surprise, and then almost immediately transformed it into a face of deep pain. A first-class actor. Mom, I have been looking for you and Sarah everywhere. You had me very worried. And then Daniel began his show. He said Sarah was deeply depressed since her small business started having problems. He told that she used to have self-destructive behaviors, that she locked herself for hours in her room. He spoke with a voice loaded with sadness, as if he were the most dedicated and suffering husband in the world. This time her illness got worse, he said with eyes full of tears. He said she wanted to go to the storage shed to find a little peace to release the pressure. I tried to stop her, but she screamed, told me if I did not leave her alone, she was going to do something crazy. I only knew to lock the door from the outside to make sure she did not go out to the street and hurt herself. To reinforce his shameless lie, he took out of his expensive leather briefcase a handwritten letter carefully folded. This is the letter she left on the table before locking herself in. It said she was tired, that she did not want to keep living. Officer Miller took the farewell letter and read it over. The handwriting looked a lot like Sarah. I knew with certainty he had forced her to write it or forged it at some point. I could not take it anymore. I screamed. That is a lie. It is all a lie. He has been torturing my daughter. Daniel looked at me with an expression of understanding and tolerance. He turned to the policeman and shook his head with sadness. Officers, my mother-in-law is very worried about her daughter, and that makes her imagine things. I understand her. I do not blame her. Officer Miller nodded, clearly convinced by Daniel's perfect acting. He turned to me with a severe and condescending tone. Ma'am, this seems to be a family tragedy. We regret your daughter's condition, but there is no proof a crime has been committed. We suggest you resolve it as a family. He walked free. It all ended like that, quickly and brutally. Daniel walked past me. Passing by, he tilted his head slightly and whispered a phrase only I could hear, with his voice tight between his teeth, loaded with contempt and threat. Stupid old woman, do not meddle in my business. The rage I had been accumulating for so long exploded and burned every scrap of sanity I had left. I lost control. I pointed at the policeman and screamed, "What the hell are you doing? Are you blind? Are you letting a demon walk loose?" The young Officer Davis looked confused. He approached to stop me while Miller hit the table and yelled, "Get her out of here! If she keeps disturbing the peace, we will arrest her for obstruction of justice." 2 officers practically dragged me out of the station. The door slammed shut behind me with a dry, final sound. I stood on the sidewalk. My whole body shook with rage and helplessness. The sky was gray, heavy with clouds, just like my heart. Justice had turned its back on me. The door I trusted most slammed in my face. Now I can only count on myself. If they needed proof a child could not provide, if they needed proof that could not be distorted by crocodile tears, I was going to look for them. I was going to become the detective my daughter needed, my first destination the hospital. But I did not return immediately to Sarah's room. I went straight to the office of the elderly doctor who had received the girl. I knocked on the door, and when he looked up, I entered and put my purse on the desk firmly. "Doctor, I need your help." I told him all the tragicomic drama that had just happened at the station about how they blindly believed Daniel Word. The doctor, a man who had seen too many tragedies in his career, listened with attention. He frowned when I mentioned the farewell letter and the depression explanation. When I finished, he kept silent for a long while, and then shook his head. "Ms. Emily," he said with a grave and firm voice, "depression can lead a person to harm themselves, but it does not cause sores from lying too long on damp earth. Depression does not cause dehydration and grade 3 exhaustion where organs start to fail. Your daughter's body from a medical point of view is a crime scene." He opened a desk drawer and took out a thick file. "This is a copy of Sarah's medical history," he said, pushing it toward me. "Here are detailed blood test results, physical condition images of injuries, and my final conclusion. The victim was deprived of food, water, and kept in an unsanitary environment for a prolonged period. This is irrefutable medical proof. A good lawyer will know what to do with it." I took the file in my hands, feeling I was holding a sword. "Thank you, doctor. Thank you so much." I carefully put the file in my purse. The first proof, the scientific proof, was already in my hands. Second destination, Linda House. I arrived just when she was carefully watering some pots of red geraniums at the entrance. Seeing my exhausted but determined face, she put down the watering can immediately. "What happened, Emily? What did the police say?" I told her everything about Daniel's falseness, about his perfect acting at the station. Linda turned red with rage. Her kind hands closed tightly. "Bastard! Wretch!" He dared to say that. He dared to invent that Sarah had left on her own. "I am going with you. I will tell them how he lied to me." I took her hand, trying to calm her. "Not yet, Linda. His voice weighs more than ours. Now I need you to help me with something else." I took out my cell phone and activated the recorder. "I need you to tell me everything in detail. What day did he come to see you? What time? What clothes was he wearing? How was his expression? What exact words did he use?" Linda, with the prodigious memory of an older woman, related everything clearly without omitting a single detail. From the moment Daniel rang her doorbell with a sad face and falsely teary eyes to how he invented that Sarah needed space, and he entrusted Lily to her, she also remembered the previous time she heard screams, insults, and the noise of breaking objects in the house next door. Her account was a forceful testimony that completely dismantled Daniel Theater. The second proof, the testimony of a witness, was there. I thanked Linda and prepared to leave. Walking down the steps of her house, my gaze drifted unintentionally toward the street. From that angle, from the porch of Linda House, you could clearly see the backyard of my daughter's house. And then I saw it discreetly placed under the eaves of the house, right behind Sarah's. A small black dot, modern, pointing directly at the garden, covering the whole shed area, a security camera. My heart sped up. That could be everything I needed. An objective witness that cannot lie, that cannot be bribed, that cannot be intimidated. I went around the back street until getting to that house. The wooden fence was high and closed, not hospitable at all. I took a deep breath to give myself courage and raised my hand to ring the doorbell. I did not know who lived there. I did not know if they were good people. I did not know if they would be willing to help an unknown old lady. But I had to try. The doorbell rang dry and strange, and I heard footsteps approaching from inside. The heavy wooden door opened with a squeak, revealing barely a man standing on the other side. He was more or less my age, graying hair, hard face with marked features, and eyes full of mistrust looking me up and down. "Who are you looking for?" he asked with a cutting voice without a shred of kindness. I tried to keep calm, as polite as possible, although my heart was beating hard. "Good afternoon. I am Emily." "I live in the neighborhood. I noticed your house has security cameras pointing toward the back. I have a very, very important matter, and I need help. Would it be possible for you to let me see the recording from about 3 weeks ago, please?" He narrowed his eyes, crossed his arms, and his attitude became even more hostile and suspicious. "And why would I do that? Who are you for me to believe you? Are you police, or are you planning some scam?" I felt my spirit collapse. I tried to explain to him. My voice was starting to tremble with desperation. "No, it is not that. It is about my daughter. She is in the hospital." Then a young and familiar voice interrupted from behind the man. "What is wrong, Dad?" A tall, burly young man came out from inside the house. He was wearing a white karate uniform with a sweaty forehead, as if he had just finished his training. He looked at me sideways, and his eyes opened wide with a surprise impossible to hide. "Miss Emily, is that you?" I froze. That name, that affectionate way of calling me. I observed the young man well, a firm, mature face, but with kind eyes and a radiant smile. "Ryan, is that you, Ryan?" I could not believe what I was seeing. It was Ryan, my favorite student from more than 10 years ago. The skinny and shy boy from then had turned into a professional fighter, tall and solid as a mountain. "Of course it is you," Ryan exclaimed, almost running toward me, leaving behind the bewildered expression of his father, and hugged me tight. A warm and powerful hug. "Teacher, how long has it been? What are you doing around here? Did you move to the neighborhood?" "Mr. Stevens." "Ryan." Father looked at us with a face of disbelief. The hostility on his face disappeared, replaced by confusion. There was nothing left to hide. In front of both of them, I told everything. I told how I found Sarah in the shed, the state she was in Daniel Theater, and how the police turned their back on me for lack of evidence. While I spoke, I saw how Ryan clenched his fists so hard his knuckles cracked, and his face reflected a contained fury. He turned sharply toward his father. "Dad, we have to help the teacher. Does the camera you put to watch for litter bugs cover the shed on the other side?" Mr. Stevens had completely changed his attitude. He looked at me with a mix of shame and deep regret. "My God, forgive me, Emily. I did not know the situation was so grave. Sorry for having been rude to you. Come in, please. I am going to check it immediately." He led me to his study, a small and tidy room where a computer screen showed live images from the security cameras. He sat down and started typing quickly, rewinding the recordings. He selected the exact day, 3 weeks ago, the day I calculated Sarah had disappeared, and then the terrifying scene appeared on the screen, as clear as water. Daniel, in a fit of rage, was dragging Sarah by force toward the shed. The girl tried to resist weakly, but could not break free from that huge man. He pushed her violently inside, slammed the metal door, and then put an industrial padlock securing it. He even pulled on it several times to make sure it was locked tight, before dusting off his hands and walking to the house as if nothing had happened. The video was brief, but it was like a sledgehammer that destroyed all his lies. It was irrefutable proof. "Bastard!" Ryan growled between his teeth, his voice full of rage. Mr. Stevens, without saying a word, copied the video onto a USB drive for me. He handed it to me with trembling hands. "Take it if needed, Ryan, and I will go testify in court for you. We are going to tell the truth." I held the memory stick in my hands as if carrying a sword of justice. Tears of gratitude filled my eyes. "Thank you, sir. Thank you, son." Ryan walked me to the door. Before I got in the car, he grabbed my hand, his voice firm. "Ms. Emily, if you need anything, even if we have to teach that guy a lesson, boxer style, call me. I owe you one." I patted the head of my former student, who was now a head taller than me. I smiled at him, a genuine smile for the first time in many days. "Thank you, Ryan, but this time I will let the law do its work." I got in the car, squeezing the USB tight in the palm of my hand. I already had a clear plan in mind. I would not go back to that police station. I would not hand this proof to those blind and deaf people. I was going to go to a place with more power, a place where my voice could be heard by this whole city. I drove straight downtown to the glass building of the Daily Justice newspaper. Jessica worked there, my best friend since high school. Jessica was not just a journalist. She was a warrior with a pen famous for her investigative reports on domestic violence and social injustices. I called her from the parking lot with a hoarse voice. "Jessica, it is me, Emily. It is. I have a story, a horrible story. I need your help." Without hesitation, Jessica answered instantly, "Come up to my office, 15th floor." Jessica's office was just like her, chaotic but with order, full of energy. Papers, drafts, photos stuck everywhere. Jessica, with her short hair and some visible gray, and those sharp eyes behind glasses, ran to hug me, seeing me so gaunt. "My God, Emily, look at you. What happened?" I let myself fall into the chair across from her desk and put my whole arsenal on the table. The USB, a thick medical file, 5 drawings from Lily and the cell phone that still contained the recording of Linda's testimony. Here, I told her, are the proofs, and this is the story. I told her everything without omitting a single detail, from the vague suspicions to the scene in the shed, Lily Payne, and the indifference of the police. Jessica listened with attention. Her face went from surprise to worry, and then to a brutal indignation. She took the USB and plugged it into the computer. When the video of Daniel dragging Sarah appeared on screen, Jessica hit the table hard, making papers fly. Son of a bitch, she wasted no time. She grabbed the phone and called her team, a young, enthusiastic reporter, a veteran photographer, and a legal expert from the paper. They gathered immediately in her office. Jessica exposed the case with a firm and powerful voice. "This is not just news, this is a battle. We are going to unmask that guy and expose the negligence of the police station. We are going to demand justice for Sarah." In a matter of hours, the media machine began to move at dizzying speed. A photographer arrived at the hospital. With my permission, he took the most real images. Sarah lying in bed, her face carefully covered to protect her identity, but unable to hide the ravages. The bruises were still marked on her thin arms. They also photographed 5 pictures by Lily, placing them side by side like a tragic sequence. Jessica was the one who wrote the main article directly. She put a headline impossible to ignore. "Black belt grandma breaks down door and rescues daughter locked up by husband for 3 weeks in a shed. Where was the police?" The report not only told the painful story of Sarah and her mother, but included a video images of the medical file proving the abuse and extracts from Linda's recorded statement. That night, the article was published on the digital front page. It exploded like a bomb. Shares multiplied by thousands. The video of Daniel's behavior went viral on all social networks like a storm. The #1 hashtag nationwide in just a few hours. Public opinion burned. Thousands, then tens of thousands of comments expressed total indignation toward Daniel and severely criticized the negligence of the police force, especially Officer Miller. The most important TV channels started covering the story, interviewing specialists in domestic violence. Our story was no longer a private matter. The next morning, before the overwhelming pressure of the media and public opinion, the city police chief had to call an urgent press conference. He announced they would reopen the investigation with a special team committing to clarify the case with speed and transparency. At the same time, he informed that Officer Miller had been suspended temporarily while his responsibilities were investigated. This time, the police acted quickly. They surrounded and raided Daniel's house, and truths even more terrible began to come to light. Gambling debt bills hidden under the bed, forged documents with Sarah's signature to request bank loans, emails with threats from loan sharks. He was not only an abuser, he was also a scammer drowning in debt. A national arrest warrant was issued against Daniel, but he had disappeared for a whole week. There was no trace at all. Fear began to creep back into me little by little. What if he managed to escape? What if they never caught him? Until one afternoon, while peeling an apple for Lily in the hospital room, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated but answered. The voice on the other side sounded formal. "Ms. Emily, this is the police chief speaking. We are calling to inform you that we have captured Daniel." I held my breath. "The loan sharks found him before we did," he continued. "He is in the hospital in the same one where your daughter is. They broke both his legs." I hung up and looked out the window where the last rays of the day were sneaking in. I did not feel joy nor satisfaction, only a void. A strange sensation of relief wrapped me. It was all over. My part was done. The rest I leave in the hands of justice. Sarah had woken up a few days ago. She opened her eyes just the same day the news of her story exploded all over the media. At first, she was terrified and ashamed. She hid her face between the pillows, not wanting to see anyone. But when the young nurse brought her a tablet and showed her thousands of comments, thousands of messages from unknown women all over the country sending her encouragement, sharing their own stories, the girl started to calm down, little by little. Those words were like invisible arms hugging her, whispering that she was not alone, that her pain was not a shame. Sarah knew everything I had done. She did not say a word of empty thanks. She simply took my rough hand and squeezed it hard with eyes full of tears looking at me. In that look, I saw everything: gratitude, regret, and a new life starting to sprout. The first thing she did when she could sit up was ask me to call Jessica. She wanted to see the newspaper lawyer. She wanted to sign with her own hand the request for unilateral divorce and the petition for full custody of Lily. The day of the divorce trial, Daniel had to arrive in a wheelchair. He looked pathetic. Nothing remained of that attractive and elegant man from before. He had his legs in casts, his face full of bruises and an empty stare. He did not defend himself, did not argue, did not present any excuse. With all the evidence against him, the medical files, the video, the drawings, the testimonies, and even the gambling debts, he only lowered his head and accepted all the court decisions. When the judge with a severe gesture banged the gavel and declared the marriage officially over and granted full legal custody of Lily to her mother, Sarah collapsed on my shoulder, crying hard. This time her tears were no longer of pain or fear, but of liberation. "Mom," she sobbed. "I thought if I endured, if I kept quiet, I could give Lily a home with both parents, but I was wrong. I was about to destroy her and myself." I hugged her tight, stroking her thin back. "It is over, daughter, now. We will build a new home, one full of peace." After Sarah left the hospital, I knew we could not stay in the old suburbs. Every street, every corner was soaked in painful memories. I put the house where I had lived almost all my life up for sale, packed our things, and loaded everything into an old pickup truck. We needed a new beginning. We moved to a small, quiet town upstate. It seemed taken from a fairy tale with cobblestone streets, fresh air smelling of flowers and houses painted in bright colors. I used all the money from the sale to buy a little house with a big backyard. Our new life began with calm. Sarah, with her innate talent for painting, opened a small art school at home. It was special. She gave classes to children with autism and other little ones from low-income families in town. That work healing young souls through art ended up healing her too. Lily started going to a small rural school where teachers and classmates always welcomed her with smiles. The fear and silence in her gaze faded away, replaced by the joy and mischief typical of a girl her age. She no longer drew dark pictures. Her drawings were now full of bright colors. A grandma bending down tending the garden, a loving mom teaching how to paint, new friends holding hands under the sun, and I found happiness in the simplest things. I turned the earth, planted seeds, took care of my rows of basil, mint and rosemary. The garden became my kingdom. Every morning I got up early, prepared a pot of aromatic tea, and sat on the porch to look at the green garden still covered in dew. One summer afternoon the sun fell like honey on the grass. Sarah and Lily were in the garden painting together. The clear laughter of mother and daughter resonated, mixing with the cheerful song of the birds. Sarah looked up at me and smiled. A truly calm and happy smile, a smile I thought I would never see again. I took a sip of tea and felt the soft sweetness spread through my mouth. The storm had passed. The sky was clear again. We survived, and peace at last had really returned. And now that everything has calmed down, I just want to say to everyone listening to my daughter's story and mine, please never keep silent in the face of violence. Never sacrifice your peace or that of your children just for the word family. There are physical wounds that heal with time, but there are scars on the soul that will accompany children forever. I used to believe that respecting my daughter's decisions was loving her, that silence was not intervening, but I was wrong. True love is daring to act, daring to raise your voice, daring to overcome fear, to protect those we love. If I had not acted, I would have lost Sarah. If I had not returned on time to that house, I would have lost Lily too. That is why, if you feel something is not right, trust your intuition. Do not wait. Do not hesitate. An action on time can save a life. Be the ones who break the silence. Be the voice of justice, even when the whole world turns its back on you. Because justice sometimes begins with a mother who grips the steering wheel tight and says enough. The story you just heard has been modified in names and places to protect the identity of those involved. We do not share it to judge, but with the hope that someone listens and stops to reflect. How many mothers are enduring in silence inside their own home? I really ask myself, if you were in my place, what would you do? Would you choose to be quiet to keep the peace, or would you dare to face it all to recover your voice? I want to know your opinion, because every story can be a candle that lights the way for someone else. God always blesses, and I firmly believe that courage takes us toward better days. For now, on this final screen, I will leave two of the most loved stories of the channel. I am sure they are going to surprise you. Thank you for having stayed with me until this moment.